Tonight we slip through the stone archways of Topkapı Palace, where the air hums with the clatter of copper pots and the faint tang of roasting lamb. You're standing in Istanbul, 16th century, the heart of the Ottoman Empire, where the palace kitchens churn out meals for sultans, servants, and everyone in between. Imagine the chaos, dozens of cooks darting between fires, their aprons dusted with flour, while the scent of saffron and cumin swirls around you. It's a culinary machine, feeding thousands daily, and you're about to wander through it. Spoiler, you'd probably trip over a stray onion and get banished to the stables for clumsiness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push through a heavy wooden door, its hinges creaking like a tired sigh, and step into the sprawling kitchens of Topkapı Palace. The space is massive, a labyrinth of domed ceilings and soot-streaked walls, where flickering torchlight dances across tiles worn smooth by centuries of scurrying feet. You're hit by a wave of heat from the open hearths, where logs crackle and spit, and the air feels thick, like you're wading through a stew of smells. There's no air conditioning here, no electric stoves, just raw, primal cooking, fueled by wood and sweat. Your modern nose might wrinkle at the intensity, but to the Ottomans, this was the engine of their empire's grandeur. The kitchens aren't just a place to cook, they're a statement. Historical records show Topkapı's kitchen complex had 10 separate sections, each with a specific role. Bread here, meat there, sweets in another corner. Over 800 workers, from master chefs to lowly pot scrubbers, kept this place humming, feeding up to 4,000 people a day. That's a small town's worth of mouths, and you're wondering how they didn't lose track of the lentils. Here's a quirky tidbit. The palace kept a flock of peacocks, not for eating, but because their feathers were thought to ward off evil spirits in the food stores. Superstitious? Sure, but you'd probably sprinkle some peacock dust on your pantry too if you believed it kept the demons away. You pause by a massive cauldron, big enough to bathe in, and watch a cook stir something that smells like heaven and looks like mud. The Ottomans were obsessed with feeding their court well. Sultans believed good food equaled loyalty, and a hungry court might start plotting. Historians still argue whether the kitchens were more about politics than pleasure, a way to flex power by dazzling guests with endless dishes. You can almost hear the clinking of silver trays as servants rush past, their arms laden with platters for some vizier's banquet. Speaking of banquets, you're not exactly dressed for one. Your sneakers would have gotten you kicked out faster than you can say undercooked kebab. The floor is slick with spilled oil, and you nearly slip, catching yourself on a stone counter. A nearby cook glares, muttering something in Turkish that probably translates to, "Watch it, newbie." You grin, because this place is alive, chaotic, and oddly soothing in its rhythm. The clanging pots, the low hum of voices, the hiss of steam. It's like white noise for the soul. You're starting to get why the Ottomans poured so much into their kitchens. Food was power, art, and comfort, all in one steaming bowl. As you wander deeper, you notice a faint sweetness in the air, pulling you toward the spice rooms. But that's for later. Right now, you're just soaking in the chaos, letting it lull you into the heart of this edible empire. You weave through the bustling Topkapı kitchens, dodging a servant balancing a tray of clay pots, and find yourself drawn to a narrow doorway where the air shifts. It's heavier here, laced with something warm and exotic, like a hug from a far-off land. You step into the spice room, a dim chamber lined with wooden shelves that groan under the weight of sacks and jars. The scents hit you all at once. Saffron's floral whisper, the sharp kick of sumac, cinnamon's sweet burn. Your nose is doing somersaults, and you're half convinced you'd sneeze yourself into next week if you stayed too long. This isn't your average spice rack. It's the beating heart of Ottoman flavor, where the empire's wealth and reach are bottled in tiny, fragrant heaps. The Ottomans were spice fanatics, and history backs this up. Trade records from the 16th century show they imported tons of saffron from Persia and pepper from India, often worth more than gold. You're standing where those treasures landed, carefully weighed and guarded like crown jewels. A quirky tidbit? They used to mix ground cloves with ink for official documents, believing the scent kept bugs away from the Sultan's decrees. You can't help but chuckle. Imagine your office printer reeking of Christmas cookies to fend off roaches. You reach out, tempted to touch a sack of crimson sumac, but a stern-looking keeper glares as if you're about to steal the Sultan's favorite seasoning. You notice the shelves are organized with military precision, each spice in its place labeled in curling Arabic script. There's a rhythm to this room, a quiet hum of order amid the kitchen's chaos. You can almost see the merchants who hauled these spices across deserts and seas, their camels swaying under the weight of flavor. Historians still argue whether the Ottomans valued spices more for taste or status. Did they sprinkle saffron to impress ambassadors, or because it made the rice taste divine? You're betting on both, but right now, you're just breathing it in, letting the aromas wrap around you like a warm blanket. A young apprentice shuffles past, his arms full of dried mint, and you catch a whiff that makes you think of summer. You're tempted to ask him how he keeps track of all these jars, but he's gone before you can. The spice room feels like a secret, a place where the empire's far-flung corners, India, Arabia, the Levant, collide in a single sniff. You spot a small clay pot labeled ambergris, and your modern brain does a double take. Whale vomit in the kitchen? Yup, the Ottomans used it as a musky flavor booster, which sounds gross until you realize it was pricier than your entire paycheck. You laugh quietly, imagining pitching that to a modern chef. Hey, try this whale barf in your soup. The air is getting to you now, not overwhelming, but heavy, like a lullaby you can smell. You lean against a cool stone wall, watching the keeper grind something orange and pungent with a mortar and pestle. The soft scrape of stone on stone blends with the distant clatter of the kitchens, pulling you deeper into this soothing chaos. You're not just smelling spices, you're smelling history, trade, power, all ground into powder. As you linger, you hear the faint slap of dough from the next room, a reminder of the bread that keeps this palace alive. You're tempted to follow the sound, to see what's rising in those ovens, but for now, you're content to let the spices sing you into a drowsy haze. A young apprentice shuffles past, his arms full of dried mint, and you catch a whiff that makes you think of summer. You're tempted to ask him how he keeps track of all these jars, but he's gone before you can. The spice room feels like a secret, a place where the empire's far-flung corners, India, Arabia, the Levant, collide in a single sniff. You spot a small clay pot labeled ambergris, and your modern brain does a double take. Whale vomit in the kitchen? Yup, the Ottomans used it as a musky flavor booster, which sounds gross until you realize it was pricier than your entire paycheck. You laugh quietly, imagining pitching that to a modern chef. Hey, try this whale barf in your soup. The air is getting to you now, not overwhelming, but heavy, like a lullaby you can smell. You lean against a cool stone wall, watching the keeper grind something orange and pungent with a mortar and pestle. The soft scrape of stone on stone blends with the distant clatter of the kitchens, pulling you deeper into this soothing chaos. You're not just smelling spices, you're smelling history, trade, power, all ground into powder. As you linger, you hear the faint slap of dough from the next room, a reminder of the bread that keeps this palace alive. You're tempted to follow the sound. You drift out of the spice room, the heady scent of saffron still clinging to your senses, and follow the rhythmic slap-slap of dough against a wooden table. You're in the bakery now, a cavernous space within Topkapı's kitchens where flour dust hangs in the air like a soft fog. The heat from massive domed ovens wraps around you, and you're struck by the sight of bakers, sweaty, focused, their hands moving with the precision of dancers. You're kneading dough alongside them, your fingers sinking into a warm, sticky mass that smells faintly of yeast and promise. This is no grocery store loaf. This is the Sultan's daily bread, the foundation of every meal in the palace. One wrong move and you'd probably be scrubbing pots instead of kneading. Bakers here don't mess around. Historical accounts tell us the Ottomans took bread seriously. Topkapı's bakery churned out over 10,000 loaves daily, feeding everyone from the Sultan to the lowestly stable hand. Bread wasn't just food, it was a symbol of abundance, proof the empire could sustain its people. You're working with a simple mix, flour, water, yeast, but the bakers around you treat it like alchemy. Here's a quirky tidbit. They sometimes baked secret messages into loaves for palace spies, wrapping coded notes in dough to smuggle past guards. You chuckle, imagining yourself biting into a roll and finding a "meet me at midnight" slip. Your modern self would probably just Instagram the bread and call it a day. You press your dough, mimicking the baker's steady rhythm, and notice the variety of breads rising on wooden racks. There's ekmek, the crusty staple, and simit, those sesame-crusted rings you'd recognize from Turkish street carts today. You're tempted to sneak a piece, but a baker's sharp glance reminds you this isn't a free buffet. The ovens roar, their heat making your forehead bead with sweat, and you marvel at how these guys don't just pass out. Historians still argue whether bread's centrality in Ottoman diets was about practicality, cheap to make, easy to store, or a cultural flex, showing off the empire's fertile lands. You're leaning toward both, especially as you smell the first loaves emerge, golden and crisp. A young apprentice, barely older than a kid, slides a paddle into an oven, pulling out a tray of flatbreads that puff up like pillows. You're half jealous of his skill, half relieved you're not the one juggling hot trays. The air is thick with the comforting scent of baked dough, and you can almost hear your stomach growl, even in this imaginary palace. It's soothing, this repetitive knead and shape, like a meditation you didn't sign up for. You laugh quietly, thinking how your gym trainer would probably call this a functional workout. The bakers don't care. They're too busy shaping the next batch, their hands dusted white, their faces set in quiet focus. You step back, letting the dough rest under a damp cloth, and take in the scene. The bakery feels alive, a pulse of flour and fire that keeps the palace running. You're starting to get why bread was sacred here. Not just sustenance, but a ritual, a promise of stability. The clatter of the kitchens hums in the background, and you catch a faint sweetness, maybe from the spice room you wandered through earlier. It's pulling you forward, toward thoughts of cooler, sweeter things, like the sherbets that quench the court's thirst. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the warm, yeasty air lull you deeper into this edible empire. You leave the bakery's warm embrace, the scent of fresh bread still lingering, and wander toward a cooler corner of Topkapı's kitchens. The air shifts, carrying a faint floral sweetness that cuts through the heat. You're standing by a long stone counter where servants pour shimmering liquids into delicate glass cups. It's sherbet, the Ottoman answer to summer's relentless sun. And you're handed a chilled cup of rosewater sherbet, its surface glistening like a pink sunset. You take a sip, and it's like drinking a garden. Sweet, tart, and so refreshing you almost forget you're surrounded by sweating cooks. One wrong gulp, though, and you'd probably spill it on your imaginary robe, earning a scowl from the server. Historical records show sherbets were a palace staple, often served to the Sultan and his court during sweltering Istanbul summers. Made from fruits, flowers, or even herbs, they were cooled with snow hauled from distant mountains. Yes, actual snow, packed in straw and carted to the palace like VIP cargo. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some sherbets were spiked with ambergris, that whale vomit luxury you sniffed back in the spice room, because apparently the Ottomans thought it added a mystical zing.
You chuckle, imagining pitching whale essence to a modern smoothie bar. Good luck with that. You watch a servant crush rose petals with a pestle, releasing a scent that makes you want to lie down and nap right here. The process is slow, deliberate, like a ritual. Sugar syrup bubbles in a copper pot nearby, and you're mesmerized by the way it thickens, catching the torchlight. Historians still argue whether sherbets were more about health, believed to balance the body's humors, or just a flex of wealth, showing off rare ingredients. You're betting on both, especially as you sip again, the cool liquid soothing your throat like a whispered lullaby. A tray of tamarind sherbet passes by, its deep brown hue tempting you to sneak another cup. You don't, mostly because the servant's glare says, "Don't even think about it." The variety is dizzying: pomegranate, mulberry, even violet, and each is served in cups so delicate you're scared to hold them too tightly. You laugh softly, thinking how your clumsy modern hands would have shattered half the glassware by now. The servants move with grace, pouring and serving with a rhythm that feels almost choreographed, like they're performing for the Sultan himself. It's calming, this quiet efficiency, the clink of glass and the soft splash of liquid. You lean against the counter, letting the cool stone ground you, and take another sip of rosewater sherbet. It's not just a drink, it's a moment of pause in the kitchen's chaos, a fleeting escape from the heat. You can almost imagine the Sultan reclining on silk cushions, sipping the same drink, while diplomats drone on about trade routes. The thought pulls you deeper into this world, where every flavor tells a story of empire and excess. Somewhere nearby, you hear the sizzle of meat on a spit, a reminder of the heavier dishes being prepared. For now, though, you're content to linger here, letting the sweet floral chill of sherbet wash over you like a gentle wave.
You set down your empty sherbet cup, its floral aftertaste still dancing on your tongue, and follow a new sound, a low, rhythmic sizzle that pulls you toward the heart of Topkapı's kitchens. You're standing by a massive open hearth now, where flames lick at iron spits loaded with lamb, their juices dripping into the fire with a hiss that makes your mouth water. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meat, smoky and rich, and you're surrounded by cooks who move like they're conducting an orchestra of cauldrons and skewers. You're handed a wooden spoon to stir a bubbling pot, and you try to keep up, but let's be real, you'd probably burn the Sultan's dinner and get demoted to dish duty. Historical records confirm that meat was a cornerstone of Ottoman palace cuisine, with lamb being the star for grand feasts. The kitchens processed hundreds of animals weekly, often sourced from the empire's vast pastures, to feed the Sultan, his court, and visiting dignitaries. Here's a quirky tidbit. Cooks sometimes stuffed whole lambs with rice and pistachios, sewing them shut with needle and thread like some medieval sewing project. You laugh, picturing yourself trying to thread a needle while dodging a hot spit. Your modern crafting skills wouldn't survive the first stitch. You watch a chef baste a roasting lamb with a mixture of yogurt and spices, the fat crackling as it hits the flames. The process is hypnotic, each turn of the spit deliberate, each brush of marinade precise. Historians still argue whether these lavish meat dishes were about nutrients or spectacle. Did the Ottomans pile on the lamb to fuel their armies or to dazzle foreign guests with excess? You're leaning towards spectacle, especially as you see a tray of kebabs being prepped, each cube of meat threaded onto skewers with the care of a jeweler stringing pearls. A young cook, his face smudged with soot, tosses a handful of herbs into a cauldron, and the steam carries a whiff of thyme that makes you sigh. You're tempted to lean closer, but the heat from the fire keeps you at a safe distance. You chuckle, thinking how your microwave dinners would horrify these guys. They'd probably stage an intervention for your culinary sins. The clatter of knives and the low hum of voices blend into a soothing rhythm, like a heartbeat in this smoky, chaotic space. You stir your pot again, feeling the weight of the wooden spoon, and realize how much skill goes into something as simple as a stew. The meat-heavy air is grounding, pulling you deeper into the kitchen's pulse. You glance at the spits, where golden brown lamb glistens, ready for a banquet you'll never attend. It's tempting to imagine sneaking a bite, but the cook's sharp eyes say you'd be caught before you could blink. Instead, you let the warmth and the sizzle wrap around you, a reminder of the empire's obsession with feeding its people well. Somewhere nearby, you catch the faint clink of rice being poured, hinting at the next staple of the Ottoman table. For now, you're content to stand here, lost in the smoky dance of roasting meat and bubbling cauldrons.
You step away from the sizzling spits, the smoky tang of roasting lamb still clinging to your clothes, and follow a softer sound, a gentle clatter of grains hitting a copper bowl. You're in a quieter corner of Topkapı's kitchens now, where the air smells faintly nutty, like a warm field at harvest. Cooks are measuring heaps of rice, their hands steady as they pour it into massive pots. You're handed a wooden paddle to stir a bubbling cauldron of palav, the Ottoman obsession that anchors nearly every meal. The rice swirls under your clumsy stir, and you're half sure you'd spill it all and earn a one-way ticket to the palace dish pile. History tells us rice was a big deal in the Ottoman Empire, especially in the palace, where it was served daily to everyone from sultans to servants. By the 16th century, records show Topkapı imported rice from Egypt and the Balkans, cooking tons of it weekly to keep the court fed. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cooks believed rice grains carried tiny blessings, so they'd mutter prayers while rinsing them to ensure good fortune. You chuckle, imagining yourself whispering to your instant rice at home. Your microwave would probably short-circuit in confusion. You stir the palav, watching it soak up butter and broth, each grain plumping up like a tiny sponge. The cooks add pinches of saffron and currants, turning the rice into a golden mosaic that looks too pretty to eat. Historians still argue whether rice's prominence was about its versatility, easy to pair with meat or veggies, or a status symbol, since importing it wasn't cheap. You're betting it's both, especially as you inhale the rich, buttery steam that makes your stomach growl, even in this imaginary kitchen. A nearby cook tosses in a handful of pine nuts, and you're mesmerized by how they sink into the rice like little treasures. You're tempted to ask for a taste, but the cook's focused frown says, "Don't even dream about it." You laugh softly, thinking how your takeout rice bowls would make these guys weep for their craft. The steady rhythm of stirring, the soft hiss of steam, it's all oddly calming, like a lullaby you can eat. You notice the rice is cooked in stages, rinsed, soaked, steamed, with a precision that feels almost sacred. You lean closer to the pot, catching a whiff of something sweet, maybe from the currants or a hint of cinnamon. It's a reminder of the spice room you wandered through earlier, where every pinch of flavor told a story of trade and empire. The palav in your pot is nearly done now, fluffy and fragrant, ready to be heaped onto platters for the sultan's table. You step back, letting a cook take over, and feel the kitchen's pulse slow around you. Somewhere nearby, you hear the faint clink of trays being prepped for sweets, pulling you toward thoughts of honeyed desserts. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the warm, nutty scent of rice wrap you in its soothing embrace.
You drift away from the steaming pots of pilav, its nutty warmth still lingering in your senses, and follow a sweeter scent that curls through the air like a whispered promise. You're in a bustling corner of Topkapı's kitchens now, where the clatter of copper trays and the soft hum of voices create a cozy chaos. Before you, a table is piled with glistening layers of baklava, its pastry so delicate it looks like it might float away. You're handed a sticky piece, the honey dripping between your fingers, and you take a cautious bite. Sweet, nutty, and so rich, you're sure you'd need a nap after 2 bites. Spill it on your robe, though, and you'd probably be scrubbing syrup off the floor for a week. Historical records show sweets like baklava were a palace obsession, often served at feasts to impress guests and pamper the sultan. By the 16th century, Topkapı's kitchens churned out thousands of pieces daily, using honey from Anatolia and pistachios from Persia. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some bakers believed baklava's layers, 33 to be exact, mimicked the pages of holy texts, adding a spiritual twist to dessert.
You chuckle, imagining explaining to your dentist that your cavities are sacred. Your modern sweet tooth would probably beg for mercy after one tray. You watch a cook brush syrup over a fresh batch, the pastry soaking it up like a sponge. The process is mesmerizing, layering thin sheets of dough, sprinkling crushed nuts, and baking until golden. Historians still argue whether baklava was more about indulgence or diplomacy. Did the Ottomans serve it to sweeten trade deals, or just because they couldn't resist? You're betting on both, especially as you sneak another bite, the crunch giving way to gooey sweetness that makes your eyes flutter. A young apprentice nearby rolls out dough so thin you can see torchlight through it, his hands moving with a rhythm that's almost hypnotic. You're tempted to try, but one look at his focused frown says you'd probably tear the dough and earn a lecture. You laugh quietly, thinking how your store-bought pastries would make these bakers stage a protest. The air is thick with the scent of honey and rosewater, blending with the distant sizzle of the kitchens, and it's like a warm blanket for your senses. Every movement here feels deliberate, like a dance, pulling you deeper into this sugary trance. You lean against a cool stone wall, licking honey off your fingers, and take in the scene. The baklava trays gleam like treasure, a testament to the empire's love for decadence. You can almost imagine the Sultan popping a piece in his mouth, nodding in approval while his court buzzes with chatter. It's a fleeting moment of sweetness in the kitchen's endless grind, and you're content to savor it. Somewhere nearby, you catch the faint scent of something creamier, hinting at the ceremonial halva you'll soon discover. For now, though, you let the sticky, nutty bliss of baklava lull you into a drowsy haze. You ease away from the baklava table, the sticky sweetness still clinging to your fingertips, and follow a softer, earthier scent that pulls you toward a quieter corner of Topkapı's kitchens. The sun is dipping low outside, casting long shadows across the stone floor, and you're drawn to a small group of cooks gathered around a wide copper pan. They're stirring a thick golden paste, halva, the ceremonial dessert that marks special moments in the palace. You're handed a wooden spoon to help stir, and the mixture is heavy, like stirring wet sand, but the warm, nutty aroma makes it worth the effort. One wrong move, though, and you'd probably splatter halva on the nearest vizier's robe. Good luck explaining that. Historical records note that halva was more than a treat in the Ottoman Empire. It was a ritual, often prepared at dusk to celebrate births, victories, or religious holidays. Made from sesame paste, sugar, and sometimes rosewater, it was a labor-intensive dish that could feed hundreds. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cooks added tiny bits of gold leaf to halva for the Sultan, believing it brought divine favor. You chuckle, imagining pitching gold-flecked dessert to your local bakery. They'd probably charge you a mortgage for it. Your modern palate might find it a bit heavy, but here, it's pure luxury. You stir the halva, watching it thicken under the steady heat, its surface gleaming like polished amber. The cooks chant softly, a tradition said to infuse the dessert with blessings, and you're caught in the rhythm, your spoon moving in time. Historians still argue whether halva's role was more spiritual or social. Did it unite the court in shared ritual, or was it just a tasty way to show off wealth? You're leaning toward both, especially as you inhale the toasty sesame scent that feels like a warm hug from the past. A young cook nearby sprinkles in a pinch of cinnamon, and you're mesmerized by how it swirls into the golden mix. You're tempted to sneak a taste, but the head cook's sharp glance says you'd be scraping pans for a week if you tried. You laugh quietly, thinking how your instant pudding mixes would make these guys roll their eyes into the next century. The soft scrape of spoons and the low murmur of chants create a soothing cadence, like a lullaby you didn't know you needed. The halva's warmth seeps into your hands through the spoon, grounding you in this moment of quiet ceremony. You step back, letting the cook take over, and watch as they pour the halva into trays to cool, each one etched with intricate patterns. It's not just food, it's a piece of the empire's soul, shared in moments of joy or reverence. You can almost see the court gathering later, breaking off pieces under lantern light, their voices soft with gratitude. The distant clatter of the kitchens fades, and you catch a faint whiff of something greener, maybe vegetables being prepped nearby. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the halva's warm, nutty glow wrap you in its gentle embrace.
You slip away from the halva's warm glow, its nutty scent still lingering, and follow a new aroma, something green and earthy that cuts through the kitchen's heavier notes. You're in a tucked-away corner of Topkapı's kitchens now, where the air feels lighter, and a group of cooks huddles over wooden tables, stuffing eggplants with a mixture that smells like a garden after rain. You're handed a knife to help, and you're slicing vegetables with all the grace of a toddler with crayons. One slip, and you'd probably nick your finger and get sent to peel onions in the corner. Tough crowd, these cooks. Historical records show that vegetable dishes, though less glamorous than lamb or baklava, were a quiet staple in the Ottoman palace, especially for everyday meals. Eggplants, zucchini, and leeks were often stuffed or stewed, flavored with herbs and olive oil from the empire's Mediterranean coast. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some recipes called for weeping eggplants, where cooks salted them to draw out bitter juices, believing it also purged bad spirits. You chuckle, imagining explaining to your grocery cashier that your eggplants need an exorcism. Your modern stir-fry game would probably leave these cooks unimpressed. You watch a cook stuff an eggplant with a mix of rice, dill, and tiny currants, her hands moving with a precision that makes you jealous. The mixture is vibrant, flecked with green and gold, and you're struck by how these dishes feel like forgotten art, rarely mentioned in modern cookbooks. Historians still argue whether vegetable dishes were a practical choice, cheaper than meat for feeding thousands, or a nod to the empire's diverse regions, showcasing local produce. You're betting on both, especially as you inhale the herby steam rising from a nearby pot, so soothing it could double as aromatherapy. A young apprentice chops parsley with a rhythmic thwack, and you're tempted to join in, but your knife skills would probably earn you a pitying headshake. You laugh softly, thinking how your frozen veggie bags would horrify these folks. They'd probably stage a lecture on proper chopping. The air is alive with the rustle of leaves and the soft clink of clay pots, a quieter rhythm than the roaring hearths you left behind. It's calming, this focus on simple ingredients, like a meditation stitched together with knife cuts and herb sprigs. You lean closer, watching the cook seal the stuffed eggplants with tomato slices, ready for a slow simmer. It's a humble dish, but there's a kind of magic in its simplicity, a reminder of the empire's knack for turning everyday produce into something special. You can almost imagine these plates being served to lower-ranking courtiers, their flavors a quiet echo of the sultan's feasts. The distant sizzle of meat and the sweet memory of baklava linger in your mind, but now you're curious about the tools these cooks use, odd, unfamiliar things that hint at the kitchen's deeper secrets. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the green, earthy scent of stuffed vegetables pull you into a gentle, drowsy calm. You ease away from the table of stuffed eggplants, their herby scent still tickling your nose, and wander toward a cluttered corner of Topkapı's kitchens where the clatter of metal and stone catches your ear. You're standing by a workbench now, surrounded by an array of odd tools that look like they belong in a medieval alchemist's lab. There's a heavy bronze mortar, a curved blade with a handle worn smooth, and a strange spiked roller you're half sure could double as a torture device. You're handed a pestle to grind some cumin seeds, and the weight of it makes your arm ache. Drop it, and you'd probably dent the floor and get assigned to scrub pots till sunrise. Historical records show Ottoman cooks relied on specialized tools, many crafted by artisans specifically for the palace kitchens. These weren't just utensils, they were extensions of the cook's skill, designed to handle everything from grinding spices to carving meat with precision. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some mortars were inscribed with tiny prayers, believed to bless the food and keep poison at bay. You chuckle, imagining your blender back home with a "Don't curse my smoothie" sticker. Your modern kitchen gadgets would probably make these cooks laugh or weep. You grip the pestle, grinding cumin into a fine powder, and the sharp, earthy scent fills your lungs. The process is slow, rhythmic, and oddly soothing, like rocking a boat on a calm sea.
You watch a cook nearby wield a double-handed knife, slicing onions so fast it's practically a blur. Historians still argue whether these tools were about efficiency, feeding thousands required speed, or a display of craftsmanship, showing off the empire's metalwork. You're leaning toward both, especially as you notice the intricate engravings on a nearby spice grinder, gleaming under the torchlight like a piece of art. A young apprentice polishes a copper skimmer, its surface catching the fire's glow, and you're tempted to ask how it's used, but his focused frown says he's not in the mood for questions. You laugh quietly, thinking how your plastic cutting board would probably get you exiled from this kitchen. The steady scrape of stone on spice, the soft clink of metal tools, it all blends into a gentle hum that pulls you deeper into this world. It's like ASMR before anyone knew what that was, each sound a tiny nudge toward calm. You set the pestle down, your hands dusted with cumin, and take in the scene. These tools aren't just objects, they're the backbone of the kitchen's magic, turning raw ingredients into feasts fit for a sultan. You can almost imagine the cook's pride as they wield them, each motion a testament to skill and tradition. The distant aroma of roasting meat and the sweet memory of baklava linger. But now you're curious about the harem, where delicate dishes are crafted for the sultan's wives. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the rhythmic grind of spices lull you into a drowsy haze.
You slip away from the workbench, the faint dust of cumin still on your hands, and follow a softer clink of porcelain through a narrow archway in Topkapı's kitchens. You're in a secluded section now, where the air feels hushed, almost reverent, and the scent of delicate herbs mingles with something floral. This is the harem's kitchen, a smaller, quieter space where dishes are crafted for the sultan's wives, mothers, and concubines. You're handed a tiny clay pot to fill with a creamy yogurt sauce, and you're trying not to spill it. Clumsiness here might land you cleaning the harem's floors, and those tiles look unforgiving. Historical records show the harem's meals were distinct, lighter, and more refined than the court's heavy feasts, often featuring yogurt-based dishes, stuffed vegetables, and fruit preserves. The Ottomans believed these foods kept the harem healthy and serene, a priority for the empire's inner circle. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some dishes were laced with crushed pearls, thought to boost beauty and grace. You chuckle, imagining pitching pearl yogurt to your local health food store. They'd probably charge you a fortune and call it superfood glow. Your modern smoothie obsession would likely get you some serious side-eye here. You watch a cook blend mint and cucumber into a chilled yogurt soup, her movements slow and deliberate, like she's painting a canvas. The dish is simple but elegant, meant to soothe in the harem's cloistered world. Historians still argue whether these lighter meals were about health, yogurt was prized for digestion, or a subtle power play, keeping the harem's diet distinct to reinforce their status. You're leaning toward both, especially as you dip a spoon into the sauce you're preparing, its cool tang making you sigh with relief after the kitchen's heat. A young servant arranges rose petal preserves on a tray, each petal glistening like stained glass, and you're tempted to sneak a taste, but her sharp glance says you'd regret it. You laugh quietly, thinking how your processed snacks would make these cooks faint in horror. The air here is softer, filled with the gentle clink of spoons and the rustle of fresh herbs, a calming contrast to the roaring hearths you left behind. It's like stepping into a quiet garden, each dish a small act of care for the women who rarely leave these walls. You set down your pot, careful not to smudge the pristine counter, and take in the scene. The harem's kitchen feels intimate, a world within a world, where every flavor is chosen to nurture and delight. You can almost imagine the sultan's mother savoring a spoonful of that yogurt soup, her thoughts hidden behind a silk veil. The distant sizzle of meat and the memory of sticky baklava linger, but now you're curious about the grand banquets prepared for foreign guests, where the kitchen's full might is on display. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the cool, floral calm of the harem's dishes wrap you in a gentle, drowsy haze. You ease out of the harem's quiet kitchen, the faint tang of yogurt still on your tongue, and step back into the main bustle of Topkapı's sprawling complex. The air shifts, charged with a new energy, as you're swept toward a grand hall where servants rush with trays piled high with glistening dishes.
You're witnessing the choreography of a diplomatic banquet where every plate is a move in the empire's political chess game. You're handed a silver tray to carry, loaded with stuffed vine leaves and spiced meatballs, and you're praying you don't trip and send it all crashing. One fumble, and you'd probably be exiled to the spice sorting shed for a month. Historical records show Ottoman banquets were legendary, with 16th century feasts for foreign ambassadors featuring up to 50 courses, from soups to sweets, served over hours. These events showcase the empire's wealth, with dishes arranged to dazzle envoys from Venice or Persia. Here's a quirky tidbit. Servants sometimes hid tiny gemstones in desserts as gifts for guests, a flex that screamed, "We're so rich we can feed you rubies." You chuckle, imagining fishing a sapphire out of your pudding. Your modern dinner parties could never compete. You weave through the hall, dodging other servants, and catch sight of a table draped in silk, groaning under the weight of platters, golden palav, roasted lamb, and sherbets in jeweled cups. The choreography is precise. Servants move like dancers, placing dishes with a flourish while musicians play softly in the background. Historians still argue whether these banquets were about diplomacy or dominance. Did the Ottomans feed their guests to win alliances or to intimidate with excess? You're betting on both, especially as you see an ambassador's eyes widen at a towering tray of baklava, its layers glistening like the wealth of an empire. A young servant adjusts a platter of stuffed peppers, and you're tempted to ask how he keeps track of the order, but his focused scowl says he's got no time for your questions. You laugh quietly, thinking how your potluck dinners would make these guys rethink their career choices. The air hums with the clink of silver, the murmur of voices, and the faint twang of an oud, creating a rhythm that's both grand and soothing. It's like watching a theater performance where food is the star, each dish a line in the empire's story. You set your tray down, careful not to disturb the perfect arrangement, and take a moment to soak it in. The banquet hall feels alive, a swirl of color and flavor that binds politics to pleasure. You can almost imagine the Sultan watching from a balcony, nodding as his guests marvel at the spread. The memory of the harem's delicate dishes lingers, but now you're curious about the cooks who pull this off, the hierarchy that keeps this kitchen machine running. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the banquet's orchestrated chaos lull you into a gentle, drowsy calm.
You slip away from the banquet hall's dazzling chaos, the clink of silver trays fading behind you, and find yourself back in the heart of Topkapı's kitchens. The air is thick with steam and purpose, but now you notice the people more than the food. You're standing among a swarm of cooks, each moving with a purpose that feels almost military. There's a hierarchy here, as rigid as any army, and you're handed a cloth to polish a copper pot, trying to blend in. You're pretty sure one wrong scrub would demote you to fetching firewood. These folks don't play when it comes to rank. Historical records show Topkapı's kitchens were a tightly run operation, with over 800 workers organized into ranks like a culinary court. At the top was the master chef, or aşçıbaşı, who answered directly to the Sultan, while apprentices and pot scrubbers toiled at the bottom. Here's a quirky tidbit. New cooks had to swear an oath on a ladle, promising loyalty to the kitchen's code, like some secret soup society. You chuckle, imagining yourself swearing allegiance to a spatula. Your modern kitchen would probably stage a coup over your instant noodles. You polish your pot, watching the aşçıbaşı bark orders, his voice cutting through the clatter like a whip. He's a towering figure, his apron pristine despite the chaos, and you're in awe of how he keeps this machine humming. Historians still argue whether the kitchen hierarchy was about efficiency, feeding thousands required iron discipline, or a mirror of the empire's obsession with order, where even a soup ladle had its place. You're leaning toward both, especially as you see a young apprentice scurrying to obey, his hands trembling as he carries a tray of pilav. A cook nearby sharpens a knife with a rhythmic scrape, and you're tempted to ask about his rank, but his glare says you'd better keep polishing. You laugh quietly,
thinking how your office coffee machine would spark a mutiny among these disciplined ranks. The air is alive with the clank of pots, the hiss of steam, and the low hum of orders, a symphony that's both chaotic and soothing. It's like being inside a living organism, each person a cog in the empire's edible engine. You set down your polished pot, careful not to smudge it, and take in the scene. The hierarchy is palpable, masters directing, apprentices scurrying, and you, the imaginary newbie, just trying not to mess up. You can almost feel the weight of tradition in every order, every dish, tying this kitchen to the Sultan's will. The memory of the banquet splendor and the harem's delicate dishes lingers, but now you're curious about the recipes that didn't survive, the ones time stole from these meticulous cooks. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the kitchen's disciplined rhythm lull you into a gentle, drowsy calm.
You step back from the polished copper pot, the kitchen's disciplined hum still ringing in your ears, and wander toward a quieter nook in Topkapı's sprawling complex. The air here is softer, tinged with the faint scent of old spices and roasted grains, and you're surrounded by shelves of dusty ledgers, recipe books, or what's left of them. You're handed a fragile scroll, its edges frayed, and you're tasked with deciphering faded ink that hints at dishes no modern chef can recreate. One wrong squint, and you'd probably misread saffron as sawdust, not a great look for your imaginary cooking career. Historical records show the Ottomans meticulously documented their recipes, but many were lost to time, fires, or neglect, leaving gaps in culinary history. Dishes like peacock stew or jasmine-scented quail appear in fragments, teasing flavors we'll never taste. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some recipes were written in code, guarded like state secrets, to keep rival courts from stealing the Sultan's favorite dishes. You chuckle, imagining your recipe app needing a password to unlock Grandma's cookie hack. Your modern meal kits would probably make these scribes weep for their lost art. You unroll the scroll, catching faint words like pomegranate molasses and stewed quince, and you're struck by how these dishes feel like ghosts, half remembered by history. The ingredients are familiar, echoes of the pallav and sherbets you've seen, but the methods are mysteries, their exact measures and techniques vanished. Historians still argue whether these lost recipes were culinary masterpieces or just overhyped palace fads. Did they taste divine, or were they more about impressing guests? You're leaning toward both, especially as you imagine a long-gone cook stirring a pot of something called amber honey broth, its scent lost forever. A nearby scribe, his fingers stained with ink, copies a recipe onto fresh parchment, his quill scratching in a rhythm that's almost hypnotic. You're tempted to ask what he's saving, but his furrowed brow says he's too deep in his work. You laugh quietly, thinking how your scribbled grocery lists would make these guys rethink their life choices. The air is thick with the musty smell of old paper and the distant clatter of the kitchens, a blend that's oddly soothing, like flipping through a book in a quiet library. You set the scroll down, careful not to tear it, and take in the scene. These ledgers are a fading link to the empire's table, a puzzle no one's fully solved. You can almost imagine the cooks who crafted these dishes, their hands steady, their secrets locked in ink. The memory of sticky baklava and the harem's yogurt soups lingers, but now you're curious about the kitchen's final moments when the fires dim and the night takes over. For now, though, you're content to linger, letting the quiet rustle of parchment and the ghosts of lost flavors lull you into a gentle, drowsy haze.
You ease away from the dusty ledgers, their faded recipes still whispering in your mind, and find yourself drifting through Topkapı's kitchens as the day winds down. The air is cooler now, the frenetic clatter of pots softening into a gentle hum. The fires in the hearths are dying, their embers glowing like sleepy eyes, and you're standing in a quiet corner where the last cooks tidy their stations. You're handed a damp cloth to wipe down a stone counter, and you move slowly, matching the kitchen's fading rhythm. One careless swipe, and you'd probably knock over a stray spoon. Luckily, the cooks are too tired to notice your rookie moves.
Historical records show that Topkapı's kitchens never truly slept, but at night they slowed to a hush with only a few workers preparing for the next day's meals. The palace relied on this quiet time to reset, ensuring the Sultan's table was ready by dawn. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some night shift cooks left small offerings of bread by the hearths, believing it appeased kitchen spirits who might spoil the food. You chuckle, imagining leaving a granola bar for your fridge to avoid a midnight milk disaster. Your modern late-night snacks would probably make these cooks roll their eyes. You wipe the counter, its cool surface grounding you, and watch a cook bank the fire, his movement slow and deliberate, like a ritual. The embers cast a soft glow, painting the walls with flickering shadows that feel like a lullaby. Historians still argue whether these nighttime rituals were practical, cleaning and prepping, or a way to honor the kitchen's role as the empire's heart. You're leaning toward both, especially as you catch the faint scent of roasted lamb lingering from earlier, now softened by the quiet. A young apprentice sweeps the floor nearby, his broom whispering against the tiles, and you're tempted to ask how he stays awake, but his yawn says he's as drowsy as you feel. You laugh quietly, thinking how your coffee maker would be a palace treasure here. The air is calm, filled with the soft crackle of dying fires and the occasional clink of a pot being stacked, a soundscape that pulls you deeper into a gentle haze. It's like the kitchen itself is exhaling, ready to rest. You set down your cloth, the counter gleaming under the dim light, and take in the scene. The kitchen feels like a living thing, settling into sleep, its chaos tamed for the night. You can almost imagine the Sultan dreaming upstairs, his table already planned for tomorrow. The memory of sticky baklava, cool sherbets, and the harem's delicate dishes swirls in your mind, but now it's time to let it all fade. As the embers dim, you feel the kitchen's warmth wrap around you like a soft blanket, its rhythm slowing to match your breath. The clatter of the day, the sizzle of meat, the sweet hum of spices, they blur into a distant memory, like a story told in whispers. You're no longer in Topkapı, not really. You're floating somewhere quieter, where the air smells faintly of bread and the world feels gentle. Let the stone walls fade, let the fires go out. You're safe here, drifting on the edge of sleep, carried by the empire's last lingering flavors. Close your eyes, let the kitchen's hum become a soft wave, and sink into the night. Sweet dreams.